Hello, I am Dr. Mirela Chernayanu, and I welcome you to the Wellness Optimizing Warrior MD podcast, the WOW MD podcast. I am not your typical wellness coach, and this is not a typical wellness podcast. Here, I'll discuss educational facts about health, hormones, intimacy, anti-aging, and beauty trends, all very hot topics, to empower you to make great choices when it comes to your health and to your body. I want you to go, wow, I did not know that. Or, wow, this is going to make a great difference for me. Our healthcare system is broken and it needs a revolution. You and I can start one today. I am willing to share my knowledge with the world if you're willing to listen. Let's get started. Thank you, listener, for coming back to get more information about fertility. So I had a couple of episodes, and if you haven't listened to them, please go back and listen about the fertility factors. So I went and discussed the male fertility factor, the ovarian hormonal fertility factor, the tubal and uterine fertility factor, the cervical factor, the vaginal factor. So there's lots of factors that are possibly involved, and this fertility process is so extraordinarily amazing and unique phenomenon that happens that allows us to procreate as a species and perpetuate our species, that we can't really survive without it. So that is why it's so important. So in this episode, I want to kind of wind down towards my, so to speak, grand finale. I am going to give you some tips in the next episode about what can we do to maximize fertility. But I want to discuss in this episode who is at risk for being a victim of the fertility epidemic, which we are living. And what I want to talk about is this fertility epidemic that many people are not even aware that it's a problem. And there's many young men and women who are taking for granted their fertility and think, okay, well, when I'm ready to have a kid, I'm just going to try and have a kid. It's going to happen. That's not the case anymore. And I'll discuss why. So please listen. Now, I have discussed in the past couple of episodes, and I always try to get this point across to my patients in the podcast episodes about investing in your health ahead of time. Women, and perhaps men too, should do that with their fertility and hormonal health more than anything. Because unfortunately, once you realize you have a problem, you already, especially a problem with your fertility, then you already have a situation that will require a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of effort to fix it. It will require much less time, hopefully no money, and very little effort to prevent a situation. Let me use this analogy again, which I've used on my social media, and you might have heard me say this, but you do not invest in your 401k or pension fund when you're ready to retire or 5 years before retirement. You're not going to have a whole lot in it at that point. If you try to save when you're close to retirement or when you're ready to retire, well, first of all, you won't have an income because you're retired or you're going to be out of a job. You can't possibly put money away at that point, so it's way too late. And unfortunately, what most people don't realize is we have the same situation with our health, and especially our fertility. Worrying about your health and your fertility and your hormonal balance when you actually have a problem, it's the same concept. When you have a problem, you are confronted with the loss of fertility. Poor health, you have health issues, possibly a serious medical problem. Now, at this point, when you are faced with this situation, with the loss of hormones, the loss of fertility, the loss of health, you realize, well, maybe this would have been preventable had I done XYZ. Obviously, we cannot relive the past using our newly gained wisdom. That'd be awesome, but we can go back in time and fix the glitch that got us to where we are now. So most people are just stuck with a bad situation. Now, I speak from personal experience. I was never offered ovarian reserve testing in my 30s, even though my doctors that had seen me for my annual checkups knew exactly that I was single, unattached, and I wanted children. So none of my docs were savvy enough to discuss it with me. They probably didn't even know, because the normal training in medical school, in residency, it does not teach you anything about ovarian reserve and fertility. Unless you go to a special webinar, a special seminar, you get special training. None of the docs are trained to look into fertility. Yes, you have the fertility specialists. They have extra training and they charge a lot of money for this stuff. I really sincerely hope one day it will become standard of care to test fertility markers and that all insurance companies will be mandated to cover this type of testing. The fertility parameters for a young man or a young woman are simply an expression of good health. And any abnormal findings in our fertility indicators indicates a problem with our health. Now, obviously, this is just daydreaming at this point, unless you, the customer who buys the health insurance, start asking and perhaps demanding that this is a covered service. Now, I got a little distracted. Let me get back to my topic. So if you're a young woman listening to this podcast, maybe at the end of the podcast, you decide, holy crap, let's make an appointment with my OBGYN and have a fertility check. There are many things that can be done to help us, the doctors, tell you, the patient, the woman or the man or the couple, if there's an issue. A simple blood test, a simple ultrasound can uncover many possible problems. Now, the fertility consultation is not covered by your insurance company. And like I mentioned before, you have to be honest with your doctor and say, hey, I just want to have a fertility consultation, meaning how's my ovaries look? Let's do this, blood test, ultrasound. Because otherwise, if you don't have a problem, specifically, your doctor won't order the testing that's required. Now, the fertility consultation might set you back a couple of $100 depending on who you see. And it's about the same with the blood test and about the same with the ultrasound. So at the end of it all, you might spend $500 to $1,000, but you might be reassured that it's all good, that you're on the right path to keep hormonal balance and fertility. Or not. Maybe there's something that gets uncovered. And at that point, you do have a medical issue, which you can bill insurance for. Is it the same for men as it is for women? As far as the consultation, yes. You do need a consultation. You need a few blood tests, including testosterone, including inflammation markers, and the sperm analysis. Now, I'm not saying young men should get their sperm checked once a year. That's excessive and unnecessary. However, just because you can produce sperm does not mean that as a male, you can successfully have a baby. Maybe a young man that's not necessarily thinking about fertility should consider doing a sperm analysis at 25, maybe 25 to 30 as a baseline. At that point, you would likely, as a male, be at the top of your game. You have youth on your side. Now, 10 days later, you're not married or in a relationship or not in a relationship, but you still are thinking about fertility, then between 35 and 40, I would recommend doing it again. So again, if you're listening and you want children, but you don't have any at the moment, please do not presume that your semen has good quantity and quality sperm. Get that checked. I think it's under $250 to get a complete sperm analysis. It is worth it. So since I'm on the subject of talking about males a little bit, let me reveal a couple of things about the male fertility epidemic. Just a few facts and why we may be living in a fertility epidemic. Well, in case you didn't know, we are actually living in the midst of a fertility crisis that involves men. Apparently, sperm counts have declined by almost 60% between 1973 and 2011, specifically for men who live in North America, Europe, Australia, and New Zealand. So in the time span of 40 years, humanity lost 50% of its fertility capacity or more. What is worse, it's estimated that by 2060, if the rate of sperm count decline is maintained, the men who live in these geographical areas will be completely infertile by 2060. That means we as a race will no longer be able to reproduce. Now, why is this happening? Well, many experts point to the fact that the environmental pollutants that are everywhere in our day-to-day lives, especially in industrialized nations, that's why it's North America, Europe, Australia, and New Zealand, the environmental pollutants are most likely the culprit for the situation. They cause cancer, inflammation, infertility. So we keep coming back to these endocrine disrupting chemicals when we talk about cancer, inflammation, infertility. And those are especially the ones that are found in plastics and pesticides. Those are the two big categories that we get exposed to. Now, if you don't know, you should just look around you. You are surrounded by plastic in everything you touch, probably a lot of the stuff that you eat, how you store your food, pretty much. We are guaranteed to eat food that has been sprayed with pesticides every day. So it's all about plastics and pesticides. So we are digging our own hole. Now, there are many toxic elements that surround us that are likely impacting sperm counts and egg quantity and quality in women. Another possible cause for this issue, for this fertility male epidemic, might be the rising incidence of medically concerning obesity and increasing stress. Now, the females are very complicated. If you don't know how complicated females are, please go back and listen to all my previous podcast episodes where I talked about all the female fertility factors, okay? What's interesting, and it's the opposite of medical research in general, because of the complicated nature, anatomy, and function of the female reproductive tract, most of the fertility research has been focused on women. However, now more and more researchers point to the fact that male infertility has actually reached crisis proportions. And the problem is, once the sperm count is affected and really significantly down, it might be something that's very difficult to turn around. I read this very interesting article published by the BBC.com entitled, How Pollution is Causing a Male Fertility Crisis. I am posting the link in the show notes. Please read it. It is very interesting. So if you think, well, okay, we got toxins. I'm going to do my best about toxins. I eliminate them. Okay, it's stress. We can manage it. Obesity, we can lose weight. That's always easy. Just being sarcastic here. So if you think toxins are affecting fertility, you do admit this is a big deal. You are aware of it. Unfortunately, on top of this, we have another big problem that affects men. The male low testosterone epidemic. It is extremely alarming that the majority of men in their 40s, even very young men in their 20s, have much lower than optimal testosterone levels. There are very few possible explanations for this silent low testosterone epidemic. And unfortunately, everything comes back to the endocrine disrupting toxins in our environment. And unfortunately, these toxins are very bad for a man's testosterone, on top of damaging the sperm. Another big factor for this is, for the low testosterone, is also the increased rate of obesity in young men, the sedentary lifestyle that we lead, our poor dietary choices, including alcohol use. I don't have to tell you that young men, especially whether they or not they go to college, they probably dabble and experiment with a lot of alcohol and other things. Now, since I'm on the subject of low testosterone, keep in mind that obesity is a big problem. Our fat tissue is a highly active hormone regulator. It contains aromatase. This is an enzyme that converts testosterone into estrogen. I talked about this in many previous podcast episodes, as a matter of fact. What you need to take away from this is that the higher percentage of fat in the body, the greater amount of testosterone will be converted to estrogen. The increased level of estrogen in men will lead to many problems: erectile dysfunction, depression, and other health issues. And I mentioned stress. Well, last but not least, stress is a major factor that might explain the low testosterone epidemic. I plan to do a podcast episode soon entitled Top 10 Ways Stress is Killing Us Slowly. So please stay tuned for that. Now, the key issue you need to take from this, you like stress. Everybody talks about stress. Stress is serious. Mental health has become a serious health issue in numerous countries, not just the United States, and much more so since the COVID-19 pandemic. The social isolation, the fear over the possible health implications of either the COVID-19 virus or concerns over the vaccine safety, the economic uncertainty and very serious financial concerns that people had when they got laid off or they couldn't go to work have led to unprecedented increase in stress levels for both men and women. What's very unfortunate for us is that stress will cause significant hormonal imbalances in the body. Cortisol is a major stress hormone. It has catabolic properties. It is meant to break down all our reserves, unfortunately, including muscle. So it's a bad hormone for our muscle. And unfortunately, the rise of cortisol will block or significantly decrease the production of testosterone in men and estrogen and progesterone in women. Those are your main fertility hormones. You need those hormones. So stress is really bad for our sex hormones. Stress is a well-known sleep disruptor. And unfortunately, males and females do experience a rise in their early morning testosterone, which could unfortunately be significantly impacted if your quality and quantity of sleep is bothered and disrupted by stress, or if you have sleep apnea. Many health conditions impact our body. And the key issue and what a lot of doctors are not talking about is the normal mitochondrial function. I talked about mitochondria in the past. It is the engine of every cell in your body. Now, a functional medicine practitioner who is smart and savvy might look into your mitochondria if you're a male suffering from low testosterone. Because in addition to being the powerhouse of the cell, our mitochondria have many tasks. One such task is creating testosterone from cholesterol. Keep in mind, there are many viral illnesses that affect young men. Mononucleosis, also known as Epstein-Barr, hepatitis, Lyme disease, COVID-19. And you might not know this, but they all knock out your mitochondria, which can unfortunately lead to low testosterone. I have had quite a few males who come to see me for other things. Fatigue, trouble sleeping, achiness, pain. We do the testosterone check, they're low, and other vitamins in their bodies are also low. So to correct the vitamin deficiencies, we do IV vitamin therapy, which is a great treatment to support mitochondrial function. And Lord and behold, after all the IV vitamins, IV glutathione, their testosterone level is going up from like 300 something to 500 something. And that's just 1 or 2 IV therapies. So please consider vitamin deficiency, mitochondria, and other health issues that might possibly be impacting your testosterone level if you're a man. And the same goes for a woman. So I'm going to stop this podcast episode here, and I'm going to continue with signs and symptoms of infertility, when to make an appointment with a doctor, tests, what's the normal workup, and then last but not least, what can we do? How can we improve sperm? How can we improve the eggs for a woman? And how can we make your body healthier, better, and promote fertility? So stay tuned. Thank you so much for listening. If you are one of my faithful listeners and you are finding value and enjoying these episodes, please feel free to leave me a review on whatever platform you're listening to. Also, if you find the content in these topics useful, not just to you, but to someone else, a friend, a loved one, or simply an acquaintance that you know could benefit from the knowledge I share here, please feel free to forward my podcast to them. If you live in California and you'd like to work with our practice to help you achieve your wellness goals, please go to our website, www.herabeautyandwellness.com, and request an appointment. It will be our privilege to help you in any way, shape, and form we can. Any suggestions on a topic of beauty, wellness, or anti-aging are welcome. All you have to do is go to the website, leave a suggestion into the AI chat, and I promise you, if you ask, I will listen and add your suggestion to my list of topics that I want to get to as soon as possible. Please join our Facebook group, The Wellness Optimizing Warrior MD. It's a small growing community that focuses on wellness, on what's new, what's safe, and what works in beauty, wellness, and anti-aging.